The old Ivy Inn, the Warrens face southern spirits in Virginia in a Civil War era inn. Guests felt something cold and purposeful watching from the shadows, waiting in the root cellar below. Charlottesville, Virginia, carries centuries of layered history within its soil. The grandeur of the plantation era, the suffering of enslaved people who built its most celebrated structures, and the quiet grief of generations whose stories were never formally recorded. The old Ivy Inn, a historic property on the outskirts of Charlottesville, operates for many years as a dining and lodging establishment housed within a structure that predates the Civil War. Its thick stone walls, wide plank floors, and deep root cellar speak of a past that extends far beyond the memories of any living resident. Staff and guests report unexplained phenomena at the inn for decades before the Warrens receive contact, flickering lights in rooms where the electrical systems have been recently inspected and certified, the sound of movement and conversation in areas confirmed to be empty, the persistent sensation of being watched by something that retreats whenever directly confronted. The inn's proximity to several significant historical sites associated with suffering and loss gives Ed and Lorraine Warren particular reason to treat the reports with seriousness. When the New England Society for Psychic Research receives a formal request for investigation from the inn's management in the 1980s, both investigators agree that the combination of the building's age and its documented history make it a credible and significant case. The phenomena at the old Ivy Inn concentrate in two primary areas: the lower level, which includes the original root cellar and storage spaces, and a particular upstairs room that successive guests request be changed after experiencing disturbances during the night. In the lower level, witnesses consistently report the appearance of a dark, human-shaped form that moves against the walls before disappearing into solid surfaces. The temperature in this area drops measurably and suddenly, independent of any seasonal or mechanical explanation. Staff members who work in the space describe an atmosphere that presses down on them, making routine tasks feel labored and uncomfortable. The sensation of being observed intensifies the deeper one ventures into the cellar system, where the original stone foundation meets earth that has remained undisturbed for generations. In the upper room, guests describe an oppressive atmosphere that descends after midnight, a sense of profound dread accompanied by audible sounds of breathing, and in several instances, the physical sensation of pressure on the bedding as though an unseen weight has settled beside a sleeping guest. Visitors wake in the night feeling paralyzed, unable to call out or move until whatever presence fills the room withdraws of its own accord. Staff members assigned to clean the room report experiencing sudden nausea and a powerful compulsion to leave the space immediately. Several employees refuse outright to enter the room alone after dark. One housekeeper describes feeling hands on her shoulders while making the bed in broad daylight, turning to find herself completely alone in a locked room. Another staff member reports hearing a woman's voice speaking softly in a language he cannot identify, the words forming a rhythm that sounds like a lullaby or a prayer. The activity never escalates to direct physical aggression, but maintains a relentless psychological pressure on all who spend extended time in the affected areas of the building. Management attempts to dismiss the reports initially, attributing the experiences to overactive imaginations influenced by the building's age and historic reputation. But when a respected local historian staying at the inn during research work abruptly checks out in the middle of the night, refusing to explain what transpired in the upper room beyond stating that she will never return, the owners recognize they face something beyond conventional explanation. The decision to contact NESBR comes after a family with young children reports that their daughter spoke throughout the night to someone she called the sad lady who stood at the foot of her bed, visible only to the child. Ed and Lorraine Warren make the journey south to Charlottesville as part of their ongoing commitment to investigating cases that fall outside their immediate New England territory, recognizing that paranormal infestation observes no geographic boundaries. Upon arrival, Lorraine reports an immediate and powerful impression as she crosses the threshold of the inn. A sense of overlapping presences, some sorrowful, some agitated, and one that she characterizes as distinctly cold and purposeful in its awareness of the investigator's arrival. Ed conducts his standard methodical sweep of the premises, using both his training as a demonologist and his practiced intuition developed across decades of active investigation. He photographs the affected areas, takes temperature readings at various points throughout the building, and interviews staff members who have experienced phenomena firsthand. The root cellar draws his particular attention. He notes that the space feels substantially heavier than its physical dimensions should account for, a subjective quality he has come to associate with locations where significant suffering has occurred and where that suffering has not been spiritually addressed. Lorraine enters a light trance state in the cellar and reports receiving strong impressions of individuals who have been confined in the space under conditions of fear and despair. She describes the experience as one of the more emotionally overwhelming she has encountered in a historic southern location. The impressions come in waves, images of faces pressed against stone, the sensation of cold seeping through thin fabric, the sound of weeping that never quite resolves into full clarity. She speaks of generations of pain absorbed into the foundation, layer upon layer of suffering that has saturated the space until it plays back spontaneously, imprinting itself on anyone sensitive enough to perceive it. But there is something else present as well. Lorraine pauses in her description, her expression changing. She describes a presence that does not fit the pattern of residual haunting, something that watches with intention, that has claimed this space as territory that resents intrusion. This entity, she states, has been here far longer than the inn itself, perhaps even predating the structure's construction. It has grown comfortable in its occupation of the darkness below ground and has no intention of departing simply because the living find its presence disturbing. Ed Warren's assessment of the old Ivy Inn classifies the primary phenomena as predominantly residual in nature, the psychic imprinting of historical suffering that replays itself within the building's structure without conscious direction. However, he notes with concern that one element of the activity does not conform to the residual pattern. The dark form witnessed in the lower level has been reported to move toward individuals rather than simply replay a fixed trajectory, and on at least 2 occasions has been observed to pause and appear to regard the witness directly before withdrawing. This purposeful, reactive behavior indicates to Warren the presence of an intelligent component operating alongside the residual layer, a distinction he considers critical in determining the appropriate response. Intelligent hauntings require different intervention than residual ones. Where residual phenomena can sometimes be diminished through environmental changes or simple blessing, intelligent entities require direct spiritual confrontation, formal cleansing, and often the assistance of ordained clergy working within established religious authority. Lorraine confirms this assessment through her trance impressions, describing the coldly purposeful presence she has initially detected on arrival as separate from the sorrowful residual energies she associates with historical suffering. This entity, she states, has been resident in the lower level of the building for a very long time, predating the inn's operation, and has grown comfortable in its occupation of the space and resistant to any attempt at displacement. She characterizes it as neither demonic nor human in origin, but something that exists in the spaces between those categories, something that was perhaps never human at all, or has forgotten what humanity meant so long ago that the distinction no longer matters. Working with a priest from the local Catholic diocese who has been made aware of the investigation, Ed and Lorraine Warren conduct a full blessing and spiritual cleansing of the old Ivy Inn, beginning in the upper room and moving systematically downward to conclude in the root cellar where the most concentrated activity has been documented. The priest prepares carefully, understanding that the Warrens do not request clerical assistance lightly. He brings holy water blessed specifically for the purpose, sacred oil for anointing doorways and windows, and his own decades of experience ministering to those who suffer from spiritual oppression. The blessing proceeds without significant incident through the upper floors. Lorraine reports feeling the residual presences respond to the prayers with what she describes as a quality of release, as though the ceremony provides a passage that has long been unavailable to them. The sad lady, whom the child reported seeing, seems to drift away like smoke dissolving in wind, her sorrow finally acknowledged and her long waiting brought to an end. The oppressive weight in the upper room lifts perceptibly as the priest completes the prayers and anoints the threshold with sacred oil. The root cellar proves more resistant. Ed Warren describes a sustained period during the blessing in which the temperature drops sharply and the priest leading the prayer hesitates before pressing on. Lorraine, stationed at the entrance to the cellar, reports feeling the coldly purposeful presence push back forcefully, not with violence, but with the immovable resistance of something that has occupied its territory for generations and sees no reason to yield. The atmosphere thickens, breathing becomes labored. The priest's voice wavers momentarily before he steadies himself and continues the liturgical prayers with renewed determination. The confrontation reaches a point of spiritual tension that all three investigators recognize as critical. Ed later describes it as the moment when the entity must choose between continued resistance and acknowledgement of the greater authority being invoked through the blessing. The prayers continue, minutes stretch. Then, after an extended sequence of prayers, something shifts and the atmosphere of the space changes perceptibly. Both investigators and the priest note the change simultaneously, a sudden return of natural temperature and a dissolution of the oppressive weight that has characterized the space since their arrival. Lorraine describes it as though a dam has broken and stagnant water finally drains away, leaving the space clean and empty in a way it has not been for longer than anyone can remember. The blessing is completed and the inn is formally dedicated with continued spiritual protection. The Old Ivy Inn investigation stands as an example of the Warrens' willingness to travel beyond their New England base when the severity and credibility of reported phenomena warrant it. Ed Warren later references the Charlottesville case in his lectures at universities and colleges as an illustration of how historic buildings in the American South, given the particular nature of the suffering embedded in their histories, can accumulate extraordinary concentrations of residual and intelligent paranormal energy. The case is documented in the NESBR archives as a confirmed location with both residual and intelligent activity successfully addressed through clergy-assisted spiritual intervention. Staff at the inn report a marked reduction in reported phenomena following the Warren-coordinated blessing, with the oppressive quality of the root cellar and the upper room substantially diminished. Guests no longer request room changes in the middle of the night. Housekeepers work without the sensation of being watched or touched by invisible hands. The building retains its historic character and its connection to the past, but the darker elements that have long occupied its foundation retreat into whatever realm exists beyond the reach of human perception. The Old Ivy Inn's long history as a gathering place for the community continues after the investigation, its walls retaining the character of their centuries without the persistent, unwelcome presence that has for so long occupied its deeper spaces. The case adds to the growing documentation of the Warrens' work across diverse geographic and cultural contexts, demonstrating that the principles of spiritual warfare and cleansing they have developed over decades of investigation apply regardless of location or regional history. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.